Welcome to Yogi Rites, bringing the lands Ellorian to life. A world of magic and majesty, of gods and mortals, of modern stories and timeless tales. Our first story, Drive Them Back, is a story from the deep history of the lands Ellorian. Chapter 1 saw two twins, Viraja and Radek, begin the trial that will set their path in life according to the will of their goddess. Now join us as we follow Viraja on the quest for her destiny. Welcome to Chapter 2, Trial of Vyra.
The river runs, the drums beat low, the hunt begins, spirits know. Heavy steps and whispered breath, a trial walk between life and death. Fangs like fire, eyes like stone, blood on leaves, a cry, a groan. Smoke will rise, the dark will fall, the trial calls, she hears it all.
Viraja took a deep breath of the forest air, savouring the flow of scents on the breeze. It wouldn't help attract prey. Trialists were expected to hunt outside the tribe's normal range. But it gave her confidence. Her brother, Radek, had turned north towards the forest hills that bordered the lands of the Conair folk. Determined to truly separate her own trial from that of her twin, Viraja turned south towards the distant plains. She jogged through the forest, looking for the beast Vyra provided to test her strength, hoping that it would be something unusual, worthy of a fine tale on her return. Her path soon took her to the village stream, though here it ran fierce and untamed, biting at the banks as it raced past. She felt hope as she travelled beside the sacred waters, as if Vyra herself was guiding her feet. She knelt beside the stream, dipping her palm into the icy flow and savouring the way it tugged at her flesh. She cupped the water and brought it to her mouth, taking the time to drink her fill. A line of ice washed down her throat to her belly, making Viraja smile. This was good. The goddess even offered up a meal as a fish swam by her hand, and she grasped it eagerly, giving thanks for the surprise repast. She bit deep into the fish's side, ripping its flesh and crunching the thin bones. It let her still the dizziness that had slowly built in her as the poisons took their effect. Viraja strode into the stream fully, letting the savage current tear at her. The waters buffeted her body with cleansing power, tearing away the sweat and grime she'd built in her long journey. It felt like a lover's caress, as it touched every part of her, or at least her assumption of what they would feel like, though Radek would be more knowledgeable there. She thought about her brother for a moment, hoping his trial was as exhilarating as her own. When she was fully refreshed, Viraja stretched, savouring the tension of her muscles, and walked onward. Now her feet moved swifter as she chased the churning waters down into a valley. She lost track of how far she had travelled, but knew it was a long way. No predator had revealed itself yet, but with the goddess running beside her, she felt only joy. She would run all day if necessary. Eventually the deep forest thinned to scattered trees and open bright glades. Life teemed around her. Birds wheeled in the sky. Fish swam in the waters. Small predators hunted mice and grubs in the undergrowth. None was worthy of her trial. Doubt began to cloud her mind. What if there was nothing for her here? Surely the goddess would not abandon her like that, but in the face of such barrenness. Viraja had never understood why her sister would lie about her trial, but now she began to wonder what she would do if her hunt yielded nothing. To return with a trophy and no vision was not shameful. You would join the unmarked, serving the tribe in simple ways. You would be devoid of rank, yes, but nonetheless a valuable member. But to return with nothing, it was better to die. No, Viraja shook her head. That was not going to happen to her. Vyra was with her. Hadn't she been following her sacred stream all morning, and well into the afternoon? Her sister may have failed, but she wouldn't. The stream had grown into something else, something far too wide and savage to cross. The water beat against rocks and surged onward. Vyra's power was undeniable here, and Viraja grew certain the beast was close by. A distant roar cut through the silence, deep, relentless. It sent a shiver through her bones. A beast? No, something larger. She ran toward the sound, feet pounding, breath quickening. The trees broke away suddenly, and she skidded to a stop, heart hammering. The world ended. Jagged rock formed the edge of the world she'd seen. Far below, the water crashed into a still lake, its fury spent. What was this? A river that fell as if into an abyss? A lake hidden from the world she knew? Vyra's wilderness was chaotic and untamed, but this? Her eyes stared, barely able to comprehend it. Viraja twisted and ducked, driven by instinct, not thought. A blur of motion flashed by her, thudding to the ground on clawed paws a few feet from her. She turned to face it, dropping into a crouch ready to attack or deflect another pounce. It was about waist height at the shoulder, and long mottled fur covered its sinewy form. Fangs dripped saliva which sizzled as it hit the grass beneath it. Slitted orange eyes glared at her. Leather straps clung to its body, too deliberate to be natural. Some bore hard fragments that glinted in the sun, like a gem tumbled in the stream. Viraja had neither seen nor heard of anything like this, but she licked her lips, knowing she'd found her prey. They circled, muscles coiled, each waiting for the other to strike. Most predators she'd seen were primal, fueled by hunger and instinct. This one was smart, perhaps not truly intelligent, but cunning. She readied herself, studying every move carefully, fear biting her soul. This would be the hardest fight any trialist had fought. It leapt, fangs and claws ready to rend her. She dodged, gripping with her clawed hands as she slammed it into the dirt, but not fast enough. A trailing talon slashed. She screamed. There was no time to tend her wound. The beast was already in the air again. It hit her hard in the chest, claws skewering her flesh. Breast and belly split as she struggled with the beast's savagery. Its fangs thrust at her face, poison dripping, as they crashed to the ground together. She felt sick. The wound in her belly was too great. Nausea choked her thoughts as bile scorched her throat. She dug her claws into its face, holding it off as best she could, but there was nothing to prevent it rending her torso. Blinded by terror, fueled by adrenaline, she turned her thumbs in, stabbing the beast in the eyes with her nails. She pressed hard, deep, as the frenzied beast howled in pain. Rolling on top of it, she forced fingers deeper, past the eyes, into the brain, twisting and ripping. Pain and blood loss threatened her life as she fought, no longer seeing or thinking in the struggle to exist. She collapsed on the beast, body broken, breath ragged. Vomit burned her throat. Blackness suffocated her. Acrid smoke burned her lungs. The forest around her crackled as flames jumped from tree to tree, lighting the night air with orange smog. Viraja choked as her eyes wept. She looked around, shocked to see how wild the blaze was. She'd seen fires before. She'd heard that one time before she was born, a forest blaze had forced the tribe to move. That was why Voice of Zorovin had worked to develop magic that would contain any future fire. Now she felt the terror the tribe must have done back then. The scene felt unreal, not truly of this world, but she knew this inferno was as sure as the ground beneath her feet. Sickness clawed at her belly, seized in her throat. What had happened? She hadn't seen the fire start. She just knew that now it was destroying her world. Her chest hurt, her abdomen seized. Someone crouched over her, touching her wounds. She tried to focus on them, but her mind roiled with exhaustion and poisons. Her misted vision revealed a figure bathed in soft light, but his edges blurred, shifting. Certainly not one of Alaska's kin. She remembered hearing from elders who had attended meetings between tribes of many types of people who were not like them. People whose bodies were very distinct, not even having their bark-like skin. Could this be one of them? And what of the glow? Her mind toyed with the fascination she felt as she seemed to float above the scene, detached, uninvolved. The pain was there, but it spiraled through the confusion and disconnection. Perhaps this was a vision, she considered. It felt like a dream. Viraja, move! Her brother yelled at her as he fled the forest fires. She turned to follow, but Drazan lurched forward with a choked gasp, a glinting projectile punching into his back. He crumpled, fingers twitching in the dirt. People were dying around her. She could not see what was killing them. Some stood, trying to fight, only to die as they were cut down by savage missiles. Tears welled in Viraja's eyes. This couldn't be. The shining man she felt, caressed her, gathering spilled guts and sealing deep gashes with a touch. She felt warm where his hands moved, and it quieted her mind. Still the venom flowed through her veins. Still she was weak from blood loss. Yet the pain reduced to a dull ache. She was being healed, but without the sacred herbs the tribe used. Her ragged breathing steadied, slowed, as she felt calm wash over her. A loud cracking sound made her spin. Her hand flew to her mouth as Zorovin, the home tree, splintered and broke apart. Limbs crashed around her, crushing her kin beneath them. The great trunk itself swayed as fire chewed it apart. It fell toward her, forcing her to leap aside. Her foot twisted beneath her, and her knee gave out. As she collapsed, a hand grabbed her arm. She looked down and saw voice of Zorovin looking at her, bloodied and dying. "Carry our spirit with you," he said. "Be the will of the goddess. Be the daughter of Vyra, and live." As she faded from consciousness, she saw, beyond the empty air where the mighty oak had stood, a single figure. His skin was grey and smooth. His eyes were crimson as spilled blood. He wore clothing that sparked like the strange glints on the straps that held the beast she'd slain, but it covered his entire chest, and he had arm guards and leg guards made of the same strange substance. In his hands he carried a long shaft and a round board made of the same. His eyes met Viraja's as she passed out. Vyra opened her eyes as she regained consciousness. Her body felt weightless, as if she were still adrift in her vision, but the air was cool and the solid ground bore the scent of damp earth. Dusk had settled. Above her, twin moons hung in the darkening sky. She had seen them before, in glimpses through the canopy of Vyra's forest. This was different. She could see them both at once, and that disturbed her. She felt exposed without the great trees that used to surround her. Sure, the woods were just a few steps away, but it wasn't the same. Slowly she eased herself to her feet. Everything ached. She groaned as she flexed her muscles, but then realized the strangeness in that too. Her flesh was sore, her muscles throbbed, but she didn't truly hurt. She slowly examined her body. Thick scars ran over places where the beast had ripped her open. Those areas it had merely scratched were healed. How long had she been unconscious? A few hours at most. She felt only a slight hunger, like a day with little food and much activity. So how had her body recovered? Her memory went back to the vision, the glowing man. Had he been real? She'd always considered the tales of people so different from the Lieska that a tribe brought back from the great gatherings to be fanciful, but now? Now she knew she'd been a fool. The world had more in it than she could ever have imagined. So what then of the vision? The things that were distinct from her mystery healer? No, she could not accept such things were true. That was a representation of a path, and no more. It had to be. She reached down to grab the beast she'd killed. It was still there. It was solid, the one real thing she could be sure of from her recent memory. Vyra picked the corpse up to examine it. Except for destroying both eyes and the brain beyond, she'd barely managed to damage the thing. It had some open wounds on one flank where she'd grabbed it, and some bloody scars at other places. But compared to what it had done to her, the body was in near perfect condition. She shuddered to think about how close she had come to rejoining Vyra, and how blessed she was that the goddess had granted her the wisdom to go for the only vulnerable point she could reach on the thrashing terror. The leather bindings it bore were odd. Her people created leather from the tanned hides of the beasts they hunted. They used it to tie loose bundles and secure structures. But this was crafting on a level she'd never seen before. The edges were perfectly straight, and fine strands of some strange vine-like thread decorated the edges, binding the leather into dual thickness. The glinting stones, too, were something she hadn't imagined before. It wasn't stone, she thought, as she looked closer, but something very like it. It was smooth and worked into curved and circular pieces to lock different strands of leather together. Lost in thought, Vyra wondered what kind of magic might be needed to create such things. And what could her people achieve if they had the knowledge of it? The beast itself was stiff with death. That alone told us she'd probably only been unconscious for several hours. There were no larvae hatching in the corpse either, confirming her thoughts. The creature was heavier than she remembered, but the heat of the fight had blinded her to any true assessment. Still, with the help of the leather straps, she could carry the full body home instead of just a part. She began tying them around her and binding them to the beast's hind legs. It provided a way to strap the creature across her back, while keeping the claws and teeth pointed away from her for safety. The journey back to her tribe took longer than her flight from it. She was tired, weak, and had to stop to fish a couple of times to get something to eat. The beast was turning out to be very heavy. By the time she heard her people through the trees, the sun had risen and sailed fully across the skies again, and the deep forest was dark. She could still hear the sound of celebration, revelling even, and realized that her brother had returned successful too, evidently much sooner than her. She smiled, happy in the knowledge that both would be granted their place among the tribe, and wondering just what path was laid out by Vyra for him. She stepped out of the trees and into the clearing, and the celebration died to an expectant hush as her tribe turned toward her. Radek was first to act, rushing forward to throw his arms around her in delight. "Sister! I knew you'd make it! Where did you go? What was your vision? Are we both hunters now? What did you fight? Is this it? What is it?" Exhausted though she was, Viraja couldn't help laughing. "Slow down, Radek," she said. "No need to ask what your vision was." His two lovers, Vel and Len, joined him. "He's the hunter we always knew he'd be," said one. "He took down a great forest spider," said the other. Viraja smiled at him. "You were right, brother," she said. "We made it. I was afraid for naught." The voice of Zorvin spoke, his words carrying across the village to where they stood. "Approach, Viraja. It is good that you have returned to us as an adult. Now it is time to see what future Vyra has laid out for you." Viraja nodded, reminding herself that the sacred trial was not complete until her path had been revealed. She stepped forward, removing the leather straps that held the beast to her back. She carefully laid it down in front of the voice of Zorvin and knelt, looking up at him. "Speaker of the home tree," she said, "I wandered far, following the sacred waters to the south. I travelled most of the day and found myself in the strangest of lands. The forest faded to an openness like I have never seen before, and the great stream of Vyra plunged into an abyss as the world fell before me." She heard the gasps of several of the tribe, but the elders and the hunters seemed unmoved. She heard one of them say the word waterfall, and realized that frightening word was a good description. The water had indeed fallen to a strange pool below it, pounding its rage into the ground. "Continue," said voice of Zorobin calmly. "As I stared, I heard a growl and turned in time to see this creature lunging at me. I fought hard, voice of Zorobin, but I have seen nothing like it before. It was fast. Its claws shredded me with ease. I knew I was about to rejoin the goddess. It was only the instinct she gave me that made me dig my thumbs into its eyes, into its brain." She shuddered at memory once more, feeling the proximity of death. Her guts had been spilled, yet that shimmering stranger had somehow saved her. I do not know what this is," she said, indicating the beast. "I have never heard anyone in the tribe speak of such things." Voice of Zorobin nodded. "There are people in the distance who are not like us, Viraja. People, beasts, things. We can only learn from the world by experiencing it. However, you survived. Did the goddess grant you a vision?" "Yes," said Viraja, "but it was wrong. It had to be." The forest was burning. The home tree fell. The screams of the dying tore her soul apart once more. Her throat seemed to close at the memory. How could this be a vision sent by the goddess? Perhaps some fiendish spirit had twisted her thoughts. "Only the goddess can decide that," said the shaman. "Tell me what you saw." She couldn't. How could she tell the tribe she'd seen them killed, their home destroyed? She wanted to make something up, anything. She wanted it to be untrue, and if it wasn't, what then? Perhaps she could retract the statement she'd had a vision. Surely it would be better to live as an unmarked, to be without rank, than to reveal anything so horrendous. Viraja. Voice of Zorvin was not angry, but the force of his voice drove her on. She swallowed hard and closed her eyes. I saw fire, she said. I saw our home, our village burning. I saw people dying. I heard the screams. I'm not lying, I swear. I don't understand it, but I saw this. The tribe's shocked silence was broken only when the shaman spoke. Continue. I saw a man in the trees who looked nothing like us. He was wearing a skin made of hard, shining stone or gems or some such. He held a long stick of the same in one hand and a board in the other. I saw some strange missiles in the air, killing our people as they fled, and she couldn't. She couldn't say that one most horrifying thing. Yet she had said too much to stop. Voice of Zorvin would not allow it. She could not lie like her sister, though she'd be willing to be executed not to have to say what's stuck in her throat now. Say it, Viraja, said Voice of Zorvin. I saw the home tree, great Zorvin, splinter and fall. She'd said it. She listened for the condemnation. She listened for the cries of outrage. That would have been better than the dead silence of the watching tribe. This was too much for anyone to take in. It was impossible. The silence stretched on. To Viraja, it felt longer than her entire hunt. Finally, the shaman raised her face to look at him and nodded. This is not a vision of the hunters. It did not show you fighting mighty beasts. Nor is this a vision of the speakers. It did not see you deciding a problem with wisdom. And though you saw the home tree, Zorvin burned bright in your sight. So this was not a vision fit for a shaman. Yet I sense this is your vision. It is a vision like no other, and I cannot determine what this says of your path. Viraja's breath came in shallow gasps. He wasn't saying it was a lie or a false vision. But what was he saying? Maybe she would be exiled, since she did not fit in with anything the tribe had witnessed before. Voice of Zorvin stood and took hold of her own hand, helping her to stand. You are not unmarked, hunter, elder, or shaman to be, Viraja. I do not know what you are, only that you are something unique, and my most sacred task is to guide you to whatever your future holds. Viraja shivered as she followed Voice of Zorvin to a future that terrified her. This concludes Chapter 2, Trial of Vyra, from the novel Drive Them Back, A Tale of the Ellorian. This work remains copyright of Stephen Kemp, 2025. Thank you for listening. Join us next time for Chapter 3, Into the Swamp.